Module 2, entitled Demand and Its Attributes. So this will be our second chapter for this course under Managerial Economics, or AE 122. Okay, to start with, we shall have some sort of an overview about the content of this module. Okay, so this module is about the demand and its attributes. So the students will be learning the basic concepts of demand as one of the important aspects in economics. So the discussions will include the definition of demand and some of the important and basic determinants: the law of demand, consumer equilibrium and demand curve, the elasticity concepts, and the demand forecasting. For the learning outcomes, so at the end of this module, so you students should be able to, first, demonstrate understanding of the concept of demand, demonstrate understanding of and discuss the law of demand, identify the different elasticity concepts, and determine the steps in demand forecasting. So for the indicative content, demand and its determinants. So these are the things that we have to discuss as part of the topics of this module. Second is the law of demand. Third, consumer equilibrium and demand curve. Okay, fourth, elasticity concepts, and the last will be demand forecasting. So for the first topic, we will discuss demand and its determinants. Okay, for demand, so this is the term that we normally encounter in economics. So when we say demand, this is actually an economic principle that refers to the consumer's desire to purchase the goods and services and their willingness to pay for a price for that specific good or service. So meaning to say, when we say demand, this is the ability and willingness of the consumer to purchase the goods or services. Ability meaning they can afford to buy, and willingness is that they want to buy the products. Okay, so demand cannot be fulfilled if only one, either willingness or ability is present. Because, for example, if the consumer is willing to buy, but he is not able to buy, or he cannot afford to purchase it, then we cannot consider it as demand, and vice versa. Meaning, they can afford to buy, but they are not willing to purchase. Okay, so this is not a status of demand, or we cannot consider that as a demand. So again, both ability and willingness should be present. So an increase in the price of the good or service will decrease the quantity of the demand. So of course, as mentioned in our first module, we've discussed their portion or part of the law of supply and demand. Okay? So of course, given the same level of income, for example, income is 10,000. So with that level, they are able to buy for that much. However, if the price of the goods will now increase and their income stays the same, so that the effect will be that their demand will increase, or the ability to purchase will now decrease. Okay, even if they are willing to purchase for so much, but their income will prevent them to do so. So, in a reverse case, while a decrease in the price of a good or service, then the effect will be the increase the quantity demanded also by the consumer. So the demand is the underlying force that drives economic growth and expansion, because if there is no demand, then those products and services being offered in the market will not be sold and consumed. So the company or the producers will not earn anything, and therefore they will have to uh, incur losses and close, or worst is to close their business. So that's why demand is very important. Okay, without demand, no business would ever bother to produce anything. So, what are the determinants of demand then? So here are the factors that we consider. Number one is the price of the product. So here, people normally, we consumers, use the price as a parameter or basis to make decisions if all the other factors remain constant or equal. So basically, the first thing that we normally look or refer or based the decision of purchasing is on the price. So again, based on the law of demand, this implies that an increase in the demand follows a reduction in price, and the decrease in demand follows an increase also in the price of similar goods. So, or in other words, again, just like what we have mentioned earlier, if given the same level of income and the price will increase, then the demand will decrease, and the other way around. Okay, depending on the level of the price being offered. So that's how price important is in the decisions of the consumer if they are willing and able to purchase that particular good or services. So the second determinant is the income of consumers. So of course, again, we have mentioned this earlier. So a rising income will also lead to the rise of the number of goods demanded by the consumers, because in this case, they are able to buy more. So similarly, if a drop in income is accompanied, if there is a drop, in the income, this will also be accompanied by the reduced consumption or ability of purchasing those products and services. So this relationship between income and demand actually is not linear in nature, but again, we can expect that this is the normal effect if their income will rise or fall, okay, on their demand. So the third determinant is the prices also of the related goods or services. So what are related goods or services? So they can be in the form of a complementary product or substitute product. So here, when we say complementary product, these are products that can be paired with the primary product that you are consuming or purchasing. So here, an increase in the price of one product will cause the decrease in the quantity demanded also for the complementary product. So why is this so? So an example of this is, okay, so we go back to the statement. An increase in the price of one product will cause a decrease in the quantity demanded for a complementary product. Meaning to say, if that one product or primary product will increase in its price, then it will also lead to decrease in demand. So the complementary product which is being paired to that primary product will now also have the effect of decreasing its demand, decreasing its demand. Okay, so for an example of this is coffee and bread. So we can consider them as complementary products. Okay, so for example, if or coffee and sugar, or coffee and milk and the like. So if one product, or if the price of the coffee will increase, then the complementary product will also decrease in its demand, because in this case, uh, the coffee will now have a decreased demand because of its increase in price. So its complementary product also follow. But in some cases, this is not absolute, okay, because we can consider also like for example, coffee and bread to be separate products, but other people would, depending on their consumption, uh, they consider it as complementary products. Okay, so what about substitute products? So here, substitute products are those products which we can buy in uh, as an alternative for the primary product. So we can choose that one in exchange for the other. So here, an increase in the price of one product will cause an increase in the demand for a substitute product. So uh, for example, in the different brands of shampoo. Okay, if one brand of the shampoo that you are using increased their price, then basically the demand for that product will decrease, and the consumers will look for another brand of shampoo that they can also use, that also has the same features of that first product that they are using. So in this case, if that one product or brand, I mean, increases its price, then the consumers will look for another brand which has the same level or features but has a much lower price. So that's where they will buy or purchase those brand. Therefore, the effect of that is to increase the demand for that substitute product. Okay, so that is the nature of prices when it comes to related goods or services. Okay, depending on the increase or decrease of their prices, so that will be the effect on the demand. Okay, the next determinant is consumer expectations. So here, expectations of a higher income, or if the consumer is expecting an increase in prices of goods, this will lead to an increase in the quantity um, demanded. So similarly, expectations of a reduced income or a lowering of prices of goods will also decrease the quantity demanded. So here, normally their expectations basically in income, and the prices will affect their demand. So it will just follow. Okay. So in the first case, if there is an expectation of higher income, then of course there would be an increase also in the demand. Okay. So if the demand will increase, then if the supply will not suffice for the demand, then the third tendency is the prices will go up. Okay. Okay. What else? What about the second case? So if the consumer expects for a reduced income, so their quantity demanded will also decrease. Or if, for example, if the prices will be lowered, then the tendency is there can be more uh, on the part of the consumer to buy. So if there is more demand and lesser supply, then the prices will go up, and eventually later on the demand will go back to uh, decrease. Okay, because of the higher prices. So it's just again following the law of supply and demand. Okay, the next determinant is number of buyers in the market. So here, the number of buyers has a major effect on the total or net demand. As the number of increases, so the demand also will rise. If there are more buyers, meaning to say more demand. Furthermore, this is also true irrespective of changes in the price of the commodity. So again, if the prices of the commodities will increase, and the number of buyers also increase, then the net effect will also have in an increased demand. Okay, because there are additional buyers uh, regardless of the increase in the prices of the goods and services. Okay, so those are the different determinants that affects the demand. So those are the factors that we consider that has a direct effect on the demand. Okay, so for the next topic is about law of demand. So in fact, as we go along with our discussion, even in the first module, we talked about law of demand. Okay, so law of demand can be explained in this illustration. So if the price goes high, then the demand will decrease. So in a reverse manner, if the price will go down, then the demand will be higher. So because again, price is one of the most important determinants and factors that we consider in uh, the demand of goods and services on the part of the consumers. So again, this is also being influenced by the level of their income as well. So their ability to buy. So that is law of demand. So I hope you, at this time or this point of a discussion, you already have the clear understanding of what law of demand is, and you are able also to discuss or describe this when you are asked. Okay, so we go now to the next topic. So this is consumer equilibrium and the demand curve. Okay, so here, when we say consumer equilibrium, this is the state of balance that is obtained by the end user of products that refers to the number of goods and services that they can buy given their existing level of income and the prevailing level of prices. So here it permits the customer to get the most satisfaction possible from their income. So here we talk about the effect of uh, the level of prices, okay, as well as to the number of services that the consumer is able to buy. So here, consumer equilibrium is also a situation when the consumer spends his income on the purchase of one or more commodities and he gets the maximum satisfaction, okay, and has no urge to change this level of consumption given the prices of commodity. So meaning regardless of the prices, their demand will still remain the same. Okay, so here, because the reason behind it is because they are satisfied, okay, or they get the most satisfaction from their income upon buying that particular goods or services. So here, when consumers make choices about the quantity of the goods and services that they consume, so it is presumed that their objective is, of course, to maximize total utility. So this is actually our main reason why we purchase goods or services. Okay, so we want to maximize the amount that we paid for out of purchasing and using that products or services. So in maximizing total utility, the consumer faces a number of constraints, however. So these are the factors that hinders the consumers uh, attaining the consumer equilibrium status. So the most important of which are, of course, the income. So again, as what we have mentioned earlier, income also plays an important role in the level of demand, okay, for the consumers. So the higher the income, the higher their demand will be, the lower their income, so it will also decrease their quantity demanded. Aside from the income, the prices also of the goods and services that the consumer wishes to consume. So however the consumer wants to purchase, because of the maximum satisfaction that they get out of purchasing or using the products and services. So when the price rises, so there would come a time that they will have to uh, change their mind and probably lower their demand because they can no longer afford to buy those goods and services. Okay, so the consumer's effort to maximize the total liability is subject to those constraints. So income and the prices. So this is referred to as the consumer's problem. So the solution to this problem entails decisions about how much the consumer will consume in terms of the number of goods and services is referred to as consumer equilibrium. So meaning to say, this is where the level of the level of their demand and the number of goods and services being purchased without having the problem in terms of their income and the price. Okay, so that is what we call consumer equilibrium. So here we have there the in the screen or in your module as well. So we have there the formula, okay, to determine the consumer equilibrium. Okay, so here let us in this illustration, so let us consider two kinds of goods or two types of goods. So we have good number 1 and good number 2. So this consumer knows that the prices of goods has a the price of goods 1 and 2 has also the fixed. Okay, again, this or in our example, okay, we will use this determination of consumer equilibrium formula. So we will use an example of one consumer in which he knows or he or she knows the price of good number 1 and good number 2, and that consumer also has a fixed income or budget that can be used to purchase those two goods. Okay, and the consumer will purchase quantities of goods number 1 and 2 so as to completely exhaust the budget for such purchases, because in this case the consumer has already set aside, okay, the amount of income that he is going to use to purchase those goods. So here the actual quantities purchased for each good are determined by this formula in determining the consumer equilibrium. Okay, so this condition also states that the marginal utility per money that is spent on good number 1 must equal also to the marginal utility of the money that is spent on good number 2. So that's why you can see there an equal sign. So because here the consumer will purchase both quantities for each good, so he is expecting that these two products will give him the same or equal utility. Okay, so here, after purchasing more and more of good number 1, the marginal utility of this good will eventually fall due to the law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay, so meaning to say, in this case, the consumer will have, or the consumer now will reach a point in which after he purchased, for example, more of the good under product number one, so he gets more of the most of the utility, but there will come a time that this utility or satisfaction will decline because of the law of diminishing return, meaning probably he will feel he will be familiarized of the good, so meaning there is no more excitement or satisfaction that is being experienced by the consumer. So eventually the utility, the marginal utility will fall. So now he will purchase more of good number two, and then uh the same also will be experienced. And but of course the main point here is that the expectation of the consumer will be these two products or goods will have the same or equal marginal utility or satisfaction that will be provided. But again, because of the um, constant, okay, and more consumption of these goods, again there will come a time that this will diminish. Okay, so of course the amount purchased of goods number one and two cannot be limitless and will depend not only on the marginal utilities, on the money spent, but also on the consumer's budget. So again, aside from the satisfaction or the marginal utility that is being experienced by the consumer, we will also consider the income. If the consumer is still able to afford, okay, to buy for those goods and services. So we will have an example. Okay, so to illustrate how the consumer equilibrium condition determines the quantity of goods one and two that the consumer demands. Suppose that the price of good number one is $2 per unit and the price of good number two is $1 per unit. So suppose also that the consumer has a budget of $5. So here, the marginal utility that the consumer receives from consuming 1 to 4 units of goods number 1 and 2 is, okay, can be seen in the table. Okay, so for example, so in the first column we have there the units of good number 1. Okay, so here that is 1, 2, 3, and 4 units. So depending on the level of units of consumption or purchase. So the marginal utility of this number of unit in that particular good. So here, the marginal utility is measured in fictional units called units, utils, which serve as to quantify the consumer's additional utility or satisfaction from consuming different quantities of goods, that is for good number 1 and good number 2. So the larger of number of utils, the greater is also the consumer's marginal utility, okay, from consuming that unit of good. So here in the table, we also report the ratio of the consumer's marginal utility to, okay, the price of each good. So for example, the consumer receives 24 utils or marginal utility from consuming the first unit of good number 1. So the price of good number 1 is $2. Hence, the ratio of marginal utility of the first unit of good and the price of good one, number one is okay 12. So all you have to do is to divide it by 2 by its price. Okay. So marginally unit divided by the price of good one. So here it also follows in good number. So we have the same uh what you call that, a process, okay, for good number 2. So here the consumer equilibrium is found by comparing the marginal utility per the dollar spent, or the ratio of the marginal utility to the price of the goods. So for good number 1 and 2, subject to the constraints that the consumer does not exceed her budget of $5, the marginal utility per dollar spent on the first unit of good is greater than the marginal utility per dollar spent on the first unit of good number 2. So because in good number 1, so the ratio is 12, while that of a good 2 is it's 9. Okay, so because the price of good number 1 is just, or because the price of the good is $2 per unit, so the consumer can afford to purchase this first unit of good 1. Okay, and now she has $3 remaining if she is going to purchase 1 unit of good number 1. Okay, and the consumer's next step is to compare the marginal utility per dollar spent on the second unit of good number 1. So here, that is, or the marginal utility per dollar spent on the first unit also of good number 2. So here, marginal, or the ratio is 9 under good number 1, and the ratio for good number 2 is 8. So because these ratios are both, uh, I mean, units, 2 units of good number 1 is equal to the ratio of 1 unit of goods number 2. So in this case, she will purchase both. So she can afford to do so because the second unit of good number 1 cost only 2, and the first unit of good number 2 is 1. So that is now equal to $5. Okay, so that is this is the level of consumer equilibrium, meaning the consumer will purchase 2 units of good number 1 and 1 unit of good number 2.